I love it.
All right, gentlemen, the real committed ones to study Torah.
Okay.
Next up, we have Rabbi Baruch Yoel Smith. Put in a lot of effort, I know, into what he's going to share with us. Come forward, please come forward.
Orange is a bar mitzvah, right?
Your bar mitzvah coming up, right?
Oh, yes. That's half my speech. Just
What?
gave. That was half my speech you just
Okay,
gave.
bar
This
mitzvah
is coming up. Good evening, Rabbanim, distinguished guests, and friends. The topic of bar mitzvah has been very much on my mind for several months now, as my son Aaron is approaching that extremely special milestone. But I must take a short pause here, and in parenthesis, I must say something about, there is something called Hilchos Lashon Hara, laws of Lashon Hara, saying evil words about people, speaking negative. So I just want you to remember one thing, that one of the examples is given that if someone comes to a lecture, and at the end of the lecture, they start walking out with their friends, and they start saying, what did you think of that speaker? Oh, you aren't supposed to answer anything negative, so just remember that when you leave.
So that beginning.
So better don't ask the question.
Yeah. I had been wondering as to the source of the celebration and the different customs involved in being bar mitzvah. We know the age of bar mitzvah is 13 years old. This was transmitted from Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai as an oral tradition, which is called Halacha LaMoshe Sinai, and then went on to be transmitted from one generation to the next. This fact was brought down in Chuvas Harosh, who lived approximately 700 years ago, which is cited by Tiferes Yisrael, who lived approximately 250 years ago. There are different hints. We call that in Lashon HaKodesh asmachtas. Is that Yiddish? Aramaic. Oh, asmachtas. Support, and they're supports for something that has been given, handed down, either as an oral tradition or as a particular tradition, but having a Kabbalistic intent that is passed down. And we see in the Chumash certain pesukim, certain verses that will support this. So, as it happens, the Halacha LaMoshe Sinai, which you talked about being the 13 years of age when a boy becomes bar mitzvah, is brought down. As a matter of fact, part of it is brought down in this week's parsha, Naso, the fifth parak, sixth pasuk. The pasuk says that a man or woman who commits a sin, quote unquote, from here we see the word for man in Lashon HaKodesh is ish, which connotes an adult. And being an adult, he is responsible for his sins. And by extension, fulfilling the mitzvahs, he is rewarded. We also, the Rabbanim, infer from this that the minors are excluded from punishments for sins and also excluded for reward for mitzvahs until they reach the age of majority. So when does a katan become an ish? We know that the word ish refers to a man, but what is the age? So the asmachta, the Aramaic word, for a hint, let's say, or some sort of a small r revelation, we may look in Bereshis 34:25. The pasuk says, Shimon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each man took a sword, quote unquote. Each man. It says the word ish to describe Shimon and Levi. Levi was the younger brother of Shimon, so let's focus on Levi. Levi, we know, was born when Yaakov was in Haran. He spent 11 years in Haran from the time of Levi's birth. Then he left and traveled for 6 months until he came to Shechem, where he spent 18 months. So we have 6 months, 18 months, 2 years, plus the 11 years where Levi stayed for the first 11 years of his life in Haran. So that's 13 years. So we see there another raya support for the fact of the age for bar mitzvah is 13. Now, the Medrash notes that also that Levi was 13 at this time. How so? Lech Tov lived approximately 1,000 years ago, said that the Medrash conveyed the following thought, that whenever the Torah used the word ish, it referred to a male of at least 13 years of age. Now, we have many things happening now to help celebrate, some very grandiose and some very humble, and in between. But where did this all start from? Where did the celebration, who had the first celebration that was recorded that we know of? So, if we look in Bereshit 21:8, the pasuk says, "And the child Yitzchak was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day Yitzchak was weaned." Now, according to one medrash, this was the day that Yitzchak turned 13. The day he was weaned was from his childish nature. He's weaned from his childish nature and assumed the responsibilities of a Jewish adult. Now, I would like to discuss a certain halachic shaila, as I heard from Rabbi David Elias. He said that I'm saying now, we have just left the season of Sfiras HaOmer, counting the Omer, which started on the second night of Pesach until Shavuot. The shaila is as follows. If a katan, a minor, starts counting the 49 days and becomes a gadol during this time, what should he do? The example is, he counted days 1 through 17 as a minor, as a katan. And now on the 18th day, it's his bar mitzvah. He's now become a major. He's a gadol. So what does he do? Does he stop counting? Does he only count without a bracha, or does he count with a bracha? How do we resolve this? First, let us try and understand the position of a katan. He's in a training period for his life for when he turns 13. His counting as a minor is part of his chinuch, meaning education or training, for his future as a Torah observant Jew. He starts saying bruchas, davening, keeping Shabbos, and other mitzvahs as early as the age of 7 or even before, depending on the child. The Bahag, an early Rishon, who also lived 1,000 years ago, was a codifier of Jewish law. He said that if we miss a day, we can no longer continue our counting. The conventional understanding of the Bahag is that all 49 countings are really one long mitzvah. So if part of the mitzvah is missing, you have lost the opportunity to fulfill that mitzvah, a Sfiras Omer. The Hamaram Shik lived 300 years ago, and I believe the Rebbe follows what the Maharam Shik said, which is what? The Maharam Shik explained the Bahag differently, that the countings are separate mitzvahs, but in a series of 49. So first let us delve into the conventional understanding of the Bahag, that the counting is one long mitzvah, and if we miss counting a day, we can no longer continue. The Bahag's approach comes with a question. The question goes like this. By Bedika Chametz, we search for 11 foods the night before Pesach. We make one brucha, but we could go to 4, 5, 6 different locations outside of our home. And still, we're covered by that one brucha. Because one brucha covers the Bedika Chametz, no matter how many locations. Now, if that's the case, the Bahag should have let us make one brucha for the 49 nights. And if we miss one night, we have to stop counting. The Maharan Shik, therefore, says that each counting is a separate mitzvah, but part of a series of 49, meaning we count the first night as part of a series of 49, and the second night a part of the series of 49, and so forth. And if I skip a night, I lose out. I don't have a full count in the series of 49. Now, if we see it as one long mitzvah, like the conventional understanding of the Bahag, then maybe we will be able to. Maybe we have to say that 17 days were counted by katan, which was the Rabbanim made him count, chinuch, and days 18 to 49 was done as a gadol, midaraisa, scriptural. And perhaps because of that, it was not done as one mitzvah because of the 2 different countings. So perhaps he can't go on counting. But if we say it's a separate mitzvah each night in a series of 49, even though 1 through 17 was done as a katan and 18 to 49 was done as a gadol, it still totals 49 separate mitzvahs in a completed series of 49, and therefore we paskin regarding our shaila that a katan continues counting with a bracha when he becomes a gadol, bar mitzvah age. And it also should be noted, it's really in parenthesis, that other paskin disagree with the Bahag fundamentally and consider the mitzvah to be 49 totally independent countings. For that reason, if one forgets to count one night, halachically, these poskim maintain that he should continue to count without a bracha. In conclusion, I would like to share a principle with you tonight.
If it's separate mitzvahs, you do with a bracha.
All say Kabbalah.
If you miss a night,
If you miss that,
if you miss a night without a bracha,
If the
you keep
whole-
on counting. You keep on
all
counting.
independent.
But the way we paskin is, if
The
we're
way
all
we paskin,
independent and we miss a night, then we
Whatever,
continue.
the way we paskin, yeah.
That was my conclusion.
Yeah. Right.
It was also my. Okay, so I'd like to say something that I heard over again from David Elias, and that is there's a principle that we have. I think it's three Gemores, and one of them has it twice. In English, it's as follows: one who is commanded and acts is greater than the one who acts without being commanded. Again, one who is commanded and acts is greater, is on a higher level than one who is not commanded and still he did it anyways. For example, a bar mitzvah boy who is commanded to do will be on a loftier level than a younger boy who is not commanded to do, even though they have fulfilled the same action. Now, intuitively, I would have thought that someone who freely gave of himself would be on a higher level than someone who was told to do something and did it. One explanation given by Tosafos is that a person has a natural resistance to doing something he is told to do. He has no choice. He did it because he was commanded to do it. He overcomes his natural inclination to say no and does the task at hand. So when the B'Rabbanan Shalom tells us to do mitzvahs, and we may go against their natural inclination to resist them, and through that we do pull ourselves up from the bootstrap and fulfill them. This shows the greatness of the individual. That's one explanation. Another one is by the Montreal, and this principle is the following: the word mitzvah also means connector. If I do something for a friend, without him asking, that's wonderful. That's all. That's very well. But it's not the same as a friend requesting something from me, and then I go ahead and fulfill it. What do I mean? I made a connection with my friend, and he with me. He requested something of me, I fulfilled it. There is that bond now. We have deepened our friendship because of this connection. So too by mitzvahs, which are requests from Hashem. By fulfilling them, the bar mitzvah boy is now connected with the one above. And this puts him on a higher level because of this connection. So perhaps now we can see that someone who is commanded to do is greater than one who is not commanded to do. So I want to thank, first of all, Rabbi Levi Nu for his encouragement, asking first of all in his encouragement. And this was quite a challenge. Quite a challenge.
Great job.
I want to thank you for that.
You can safely ask the question, how was it?
Please,
Great.
don't forget. Okay, Hilchis Lashon Hara.
Thank you very much.
Yashikoyach.
Thank you, Baruch Hill. Very well done. So last but certainly not least, we have a very interesting topic. People put on 2 pairs of tefillin and everyone wonders why and how. So Adam Spiro, please enlighten us.
Hey everybody. So a lot of us put on 2 pairs of tefillin every day. And like Levi said, but we want to know why and how and what's in them and why do we do it and so on. So first thing to do is ask what's in any pair of tefillin, right? The Rashi tefillin that everyone puts on, what's in them? It's 4 parshas from the Torah. There's in the head tefillin there's 4 compartments, and there are 4 parshas, 4 paragraphs from the Torah, 4 passages. And in the arm tefillin it's 1 compartment, and it's on 1 scroll, and it's the same 4 parshas from the Torah as well. And if you turn to page 13 of the program, it might be a good idea to look in the Siddur, I think at page 84. The Siddur, page 84 has it too. Sorry, 82. Starting at 82 at the bottom. It has the Shema that we say when we put on Rabbeinu Tam, but on page 83 or 84 it has the Kaddish Li. So it says first appearing in Torah. These are the 4 places in the Torah that mention tefillin at all. First in Shmos, in Exodus, in chapter 13, there's the Kaddish lane. You see that on page 84.
Starts in the middle.
Yeah, in the middle of right, sorry. Page 83 it starts as Kaddish Li. Page 83 at the bottom, V'yadaber Hashem Moshe Lamer Kaddish Li Kol B'chor Peter Rechem. You go through there and it mentions tefillin. The next place is just a few verses later. You see on page 13 of the program guide, it mentions V'haya Kiviyacha. And that we see on page 84. Around in the middle of the page, V'haya Kiviyacha Hashem El Eretz HaKnani, etc., etc. That's also in the book of Exodus. And then in Deuteronomy, in Dvarim, it mentions tefillin twice. Once in the Shema, the parasha of Shema, which is the first paragraph of the Shema that we all read every day. And next in V'hayim Shemaya, which is about 5 chapters later, also in the book of Dvarim, which is the second chapter of Shema. So they all mention, that's where tefillin is mentioned. So now, we know that they go in, these 4 passages are written on 4 separate parchments. They go in the tefillin of the head, and they go on one parchment, and it goes in one compartment, the tefillin of the arm. So how are they placed in there? And we're going to look at the Gemara in Tractate Menachos, which is where the discussion starts, and it goes in different directions from there. So it says Tanu Rabbanan, that it's taught in a brisa, says the Gemara, that Sidran, Kaddish Li V'haya Kiviyacha Miyamin, that the order is Kaddish Li, and then V'haya Kiviyacha from the right, Miyamin. Shema V'hayim Shemaya Mismo. It says the Shema and V'hayim Shemaya from the left. So, what does that mean? But the Gemara then continues. Ve'atani ibcha, but doesn't it say elsewhere in another brayso the opposite? So Amar Abaye, the sage Abaye, explains that one of them is talking about the right of the person looking at the guy wearing tefillin, and one of them is talking about the right of the guy, of the person wearing the tefillin himself. So it's not a contradiction. But then it concludes v'kor kor kasidron, and the reader reads in order. So again, it's a very short. This is the whole discussion of the order of Shema and the Tefillin in the Gemara, and it's short, and we need to understand what it means. So, how do we understand what a Gemara means? We turn to Rashi, who explains what the whole Gemara means. Or we start by turning to Rashi, and we'll see that not everyone, in this case, Rabbeinu Tam in particular, agrees with Rashi. But Rashi explains this to mean. First, he explains that the discussion between the two, that one we're talking about the person facing and one we're talking about the wearer. But in particular, he explains the words Hakuri Hakuri Kasidron. The reader reads in order. He says you read it, the person looking at the guy wearing tefillin, reads it in the order that it appears in the Torah. So, if I'm looking at Martin, for example, and he's wearing tefillin, then if I'm reading from right to left, as I would in Hebrew, then it appears in the order it appears in Torah. The Kaddish Li V'haya Kiviyacha, Shema V'hayim Shemaya, from right to left. The Tosfos says that Rabbeinu Tam disagrees with this. Who's Tosfos first, and who's Rabbeinu Tam? Tosfos are also commentators on the Gemara. They're grandchildren of Rashi for the most part, I think, if not entirely. All of them are. Sorry?
A lot of them.
A lot of them are, including Rabbeinu Tam. So, Tosfos cites Rabbeinu Tam, and he says Rabbeinu Tam disagrees. And what's his problem? His problem is the language used in the Gemara, and the language is that Kaddish Li V'haya V'yacha from the right, Shema V'hayim Shemaya from the left. Why doesn't he just say, we read it from the right, Kaddish Li V'haya Kiviyacha, Shema V'hayim Shemaya. If he needs to tell us it's from the left, he's saying, okay, so then you start from the right, you go in, and then you start from the left, you go in. You see this diagram here on page 15, which shows the way Rabbeinu Tam understands it. It says, So then how does he understand? The question we have is, how does he understand that the reader reads in order? Rashi says the reader reads in order. Okay, you read it in order. Start at the beginning and go to the end. He says, well, the way it's saying in the Gemara, that meaning start from the right and go in one, and then start from the left and go in one. If you do in that order, then you do it in the order from the 1, 2, 3, 4, in the order of the way it appears in the Torah. So first, second, third, fourth on the way in. So that is the basic disagreement between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, and it actually that's in the head tefillin. The arm tefillin, it represents itself in similarly because Rabbeinu Tam also is not written in the same order. On the parchment in the arm tefillin, they start from the top. The parshias, 1, 2, 3, 4. But Rabbeinu Tam says 1, 2, 3 at the bottom, and then 4. But he agrees, and everyone agrees, it needs to be written in the right order. So you need to leave us 1, 2, leave a space, then enough space to write V'hayim Shemaya, write Shema first at the bottom, and then come back and write V'hayim Shemaya. So, what do we do according to halacha? We turn to the Shulchan Aruch. We're going back from close to 2,000 years ago now to about 600 or 700 years ago. And it's on page 16 of the booklet. He says that, according to Rashi, it's put in the order he describes. He says, Seder nachasin bebatim l'Rashi v'Rambam, Kaddish mismal hamaniach. Oh, he starts the other way. He doesn't say from the right of the person looking at the guy wearing the tefillin. He says from the left of the person wearing the tefillin, but he's quoting Rashi, and he says the Rambam agrees. And you go in order, essentially. It says Kaddish, you start with Kaddish from the left. So from my left it would be on the outer box, and then you go V'haya Kaviecha in the second compartment, Shema in the third compartment, and V'hayim Shema in the fourth compartment on the outer wall on the fourth compartment. And he says, but for Rabbeinu Tam, the third one would have V'hayim Shemaya, and the outer compartment would have Shema, and we'll get to that after. So, but then he continues and he says, Yerushalayim Yatsa Yidei Shneihem. So he says that in general. Oh, sorry. He says Minhag Olam Karashi v'Rambam. That's the important part. That it says in general the custom of the world is that we do like Rashi and Rambam. That's why everyone puts on Rashi tefillin, right? Meaning it goes in order. But he says that. He continues to say, Yerushalayim, one who fears heaven, will put on both of them. And he should buy two pairs of tefillin, but he should have in mind that when he's putting them on, that put them on at the same time, he says later. And you have in mind when putting them on that whichever one is the right one, that's the one I'm fulfilling my obligation with. Meaning, whichever one is according to halacha, that's the one I'm fulfilling my obligation with. And the other one are just like straps. And we'll see why later. Essentially, because there's a discussion as to whether putting on two pairs of tefillin is bal toisiv. That are we adding to the mitzvahs of the Torah, which is forbidden? So there's an opinion actually that says not, following the Arizal, I think, if I saw, but in general, the answer is, well, no matter what, one of them is right, al pi halacha, one of them is wrong. There's a machlokes, so you want to be careful and you want to cover your bases, but you're not adding to the Torah. It's just you say to yourself, whichever one is right, that's the one I'm doing. And we'll see in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he says that one should be careful, though, not to have in mind to be yotze with both of them when saying the bracha, because then that could be a problem of adding to the mitzvahs of Torah, because only one of them is. We have one mitzvah to put on one type of tefillin, and there's just a question as to which one it is. But then at the end, so he says, essentially he says, one who has a fear of heaven should put on both. But then he says, Lo yasechen ela mi she moichzek umefursam b'chasidus. the only person who should do this is someone who's well known and habituated, who's known for his piety. A really frum guy should do this only, not someone who's otherwise it's showing off a little bit, right? So that's about 600-700 years ago. Then the Alter Rebbe is about 300 or 400 years later.
You just quoted that the Shulchan Aruch.
That's the Shulchan Aruch, yeah. That's the Shulchan Aruch.
Back to the Shulchan Aruch. That was the Shulchan Aruch.
That was the Shulchan Aruch, and now we're going to the Alter Rebbe, who's about 300 or 400 years later, who expands on it a little bit. He again quotes that the halacha is like Rashi. He says, but he adds that according to Rabbeinu Tam and those who hold like him, although I'm not sure who holds like Rabbeinu Tam other than Rabbeinu Tam. Some people, sorry?
Some of the Go'anim.
Some of the Go'anim, okay, some of the
From a previous generation.
from previous generation, that according to Rabbeinu Tam and those who hold by him, someone who's only put on Rashi tefillin his whole life has never fulfilled the mitzvah of tefillin, according to Rabbeinu Tam. So he says, therefore, a God-fearing person should endeavor to have 2 pairs of tefillin. That's similar to what the Shulchan Aruch says, the Alter Rebbe says in his Shulchan Aruch.
Not simultaneously, not
He says that one could do it simultaneously.
You can't, they put it after.
But if you don't know how, then you put it on after. But another reason he says to put it on after is because, for the same reason, not to show off.
Shouldn't,
That you shouldn't show off. I'm wearing 2 pairs of tefillin. Also, I mean, I think practically speaking, I don't know if it started with the Alter Rebbe, the very large tefillin that Chabad has the custom to wear, but he says there is because
Europe
brought that there's place for both of them.
Europe, they all wear what? Large tefillin.
They all wore large tefillin. Okay.
So you wear the small ones, you can.
You see, it says there's place for both of them, but perhaps not with the very large tefillin that we wear. So, but he changes, the Alter Rebbe changes the words a little bit from what the Shulchan Aruch said in terms of why one should not do it. He says on page 18, in any case, Lo kol rotze litolas Hashem yava v'yitol. Not everyone who wants to literally grab onto Hashem should come and do so.
No. The name he means the name of piety.
Right.
To claim the name of piety. Not
Right, they claim a name for themselves almost.
His own name.
Okay. So he shouldn't do this. Lo yasakin became a reim. He shouldn't do this kind of in public to put on two pairs of tefillin. But only a person who's pious and who has serious conduct and so on should do so, since it's the universal custom to wear only Rashi tefillin. If a person who doesn't have, I'm reading in English now, a person does not have a reputation, undertakes this stringency, he appears to be pretentious unless he's similarly stringent in other areas. So it's not the exact same reason that the Shulchan Aruch described. The Shulchan Aruch described that one shouldn't do so unless he himself is well known for being really frum, is the way it explained. But here it says you shouldn't do it in a place where others are going to see you, essentially. So it's almost like a concession that the Alter Rebbe is making. He says that it's important and one should do so, and he even he even mentions that according to the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, without having put on Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, you're not Yotze in your entire life. And then he says, okay, where someone doesn't see you, since it's universal custom of Rashi, maybe you shouldn't be seen doing it, and don't put on two necessarily. And later on, we see in this siddur that he says that you put on Rabbeinu, perhaps that's why he put on Rabbeinu Tam tefillin after davening. He says to daven in, it says on page 19, one for whom fear of heaven is important should don Rabbeinu Tam tefillin without a bracha after davening at home, study Torah for an hour while wearing them. If he's concerned that he appears pretentious while wearing them in shul, or if he feels more comfortable studying them at home. So that solves the problem. You put on the Rabbeinu Tam, you don't need to worry about feeling pretentious and so on. So in our circles, in our generations, where it's common custom among Hasidim and among many other people to put on the Rabbeinu Tam, we certainly don't need to feel pretentious about wearing them. appear to that we appear pretentious wearing them, because it's not an uncommon thing. Now, it's become less uncommon or more common since the Rebbe spoke about it in, I believe it was 1976. There was a Purim where, until then, the practice among Hasidim was to start putting it on after one gets married, and if one wanted to put on Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin before that, one could write to the Rebbe and ask for permission and explain why and so on. And the Rebbe would sometimes grant permission and sometimes not. But at this point, at this Farbrengen, the Rebbe mentioned that one should start, or everyone from Bar Mitzvah should start putting Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, and they don't need to write in anymore. And he quotes what the Alter Rebbe writes, that one who doesn't do so, it's as if he's never put on tefillin in his life, according to the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam. Although he tempers it by saying that although because the halacha is like Rashi, it's not exactly the same, but still it's a very good reason to wear a Rabbeinu Tam tefillin.
Did we just quote now?
Yeah.
That's
You're going to quote this?
Because
This is prevailing. Masim kol hamacham is that they're both valid.
right.
If we don't have, you shouldn't have this kavanah that way anymore. You don't realize Shulchan Aruch already now. You're contemporary. Contemporary. Yes, and according to that, so it includes this Masim kol hamacham too.
Yeah, he mentions it, but not that we should necessarily make a bracha, include it, have it in mind while we're making the bracha. To be yetz both of them.
He has to be doing both. Why? Because both are valid. You shouldn't have in mind the old kavanah that's either this one or that one. Since that is, I was Megala, they're both true.
Okay, so then that's what it is. So then there's.
I didn't look at this thing here, but it's all makes the same point.
Yeah, he says since we're not in the latter generations, we're not sure in this matter. We're not certain in this matter. We wear both. The implication is that is his view we're obliged on account of doubt to put on both pairs of tefillin. Right. So he's quoting from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch that there's a doubt, and because of that doubt, we're obliged to make sure that we're covered our bases, that we're yotzi by putting on both of them. So there's an interesting point that came up here actually, that there's the rabbi mentioned, I think it the Shilas V'Tshuvas Mina Shemayim, I think he mentioned in a speech recently, where he was, I don't know exactly who he was, but he was a tzaddik of some sort, and he would page 17.
Page 15.
Yeah, footnote 17 tells you who he is.
Footnote 17. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Levi Halevi of France, a Halachic authority and Mekubal. So he would address questions to heaven. Apparently, before he'd go to sleep, he would write a letter, and he would wake up and he would have a response. So he wrote a letter. Is the halacha like Rashi or like Rabbeinu Tam? And he woke up and the response was, just like there's a dispute in the earthly realm, there's a dispute in the heavenly realm. So it's not so simple. So I didn't see this. I didn't have a chance to go through everything. But I think one of the almost obvious reasons, but it needs to be expressed, that why, especially as in the later generations, as we're coming closer to Mashiach, it started becoming that everyone, starting from Bar Mitzvah in Chabad, wears Rabbeinu Tam, and that a lot of people do in general, and even more people can than anyone can, precisely because of that, precisely because Mashiach is coming, and the details are that much more important. How we can affect the details of the world are that much more important. We see in Chassidus all the time, and the Rebbe encouraged it so strongly in the Sichas we saw, because in the final push to Mashiach, all the little details can be important. We need to leave no stone unturned, and we need to connect in all the ways we can. The Rebbe actually said, when he gave a Sicha where he mentioned about himself when he started putting on 4 pairs of tefillin. He said that he mentioned in the Sicha there, he named a few Hasidim, Rabbi the Masmid, I don't remember whom else, that wore 4 pairs of tefillin, and he said he was scared to. And he said, but the Frierdiker Rebbe told him to start wearing 4 pairs of tefillin. So he said, so I did. And he said it was on the Rebbe's shoulders. He said. So for us, there's no need to worry about feeling pretentious or this and that. It's on the Rebbe's shoulders. He wants us to. He needs us to. He thinks there's a good reason to, and it's another way to help connect and to help reveal God in this world in another physical way.
Just to add, there was a famous question: is before Rashi made a town, what did people do? We're going to film with thousands of years before Rashi made a town. All of a sudden, Rashi made a town. The answer is some did like this and some did like this.
In the
and you bring it here.
The Shana Koil here on page 19 and 20, he quotes Ma'atze Eden, who goes through telling you which Bezdin did which way for a whole bunch of generations. And he concludes by saying, since the Arizal said both, we do both.
If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but in the Dead Sea Scrolls,
they're both.
There's film, and they find
it's called the Qumran Tefillin. You can Google it. The Qumran with a Q.
Right, yeah.
And they found more than 2 pairs of tefillin. There's a whole bunch of scholarship discussing just exactly what it is. There's a great lecture on Chabad.org about the Qumran Tefillin and what it means and how it connects to all this. Yes, you can see in the Israel Museum also, but the ones in the Israel Museum come from the carrots. Yeah, a lot of them come from the carrot, from the Essenes, from the Essenes, not the carrots.
So it's not exactly a raya because they were split to
But still, the Qumran not exactly, it's a different finding. Then you can Google it. Thank you to everybody. Big Yashin Kayach. We say in our davening every day when we ask for Mashiach, it concluded, we ask to build a Beis Hamikdash and to find us, give us our portion in your Torah. Hopefully, inspired to go search for your portion in Torah, carve out your niche, learn and discover and delve, and we look forward to many more like this.
I want to express thanks to all of us to Rabbi Levi. As you can see, the incredible work has went into.
Yeah,
You have to be honest, you have to help yourself.
I now apologize for the late change.
Everybody, wonderfully inspiring, uplifting evenings.